Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about a critical issue in global technology, microchips, and specifically the European Union's big plan to ramp up its role in this vital industry. The European Court of Auditors just released a special report with a long title, The EU Strategy for Microchips, Reasonable Progress in its implementation, but the CHIPS Act is very unlikely to be sufficient to reach the overly ambitious digital decade target. In short, the European Union wants 20% of the global microchip market by 2030. But according to this report, that goal is almost certainly out of reach. Let's break this down. Back in 2021, the EU set its sights on significantly boosting its presence in the chip-making world. This became part of the digital decade strategy. The goal? To produce 1/5 of the world's microchips by value by 2030. To help make that happen, the EU CHIPS Act was launched in 2022. It was a direct response to the global chip shortages during COVID-19, which exposed how vulnerable Europe was to supply chain disruptions. The idea was to stimulate investment, innovation, and production, and give Europe more control over this essential technology. But here is the problem. According to the European Court of Auditors, Europe is way off track. For one, the investment just isn't enough. The CHIPS Act is backed by about 86 billion euros through 2030, but only 4.5 billion euros of that comes from the European Commission. The rest is supposed to come from individual member states and private companies. Now compare that to the 405 billion euros invested by the top global chip makers like TSMC, Samsung, and Intel over just 3 years between 2020 and 2023. That is nearly 5 times as much money in a much shorter time. And money is just part of the story. There are deeper structural issues that make the EU's goals so hard to reach. The auditors point out that Europe relies heavily on imported raw materials to build chips. It has higher energy costs than global competitors. There is a shortage of skilled workers in the semiconductor sector, and the industry itself is concentrated in just a few big players, which means that if even one project gets delayed or cancelled, it can throw off the entire strategy. On top of all that, coordination is a mess. The European Commission manages only a small slice of the budget and has no real power to align national investments. Each country is basically doing its own thing. And here is a key finding. There is no clear monitoring system or transparent targets to measure if the CHIPS Act is actually working. So, what does this all mean? Even with new factories and rising capacity, the EU's share of the global chip market is expected to grow only slightly, from 9.8% in 2022 to about 11.7% in 2030, according to the Commission's own estimates. That is a far cry from the 20% target. The CHIPS Act has brought energy and funding to a critical sector, and that is important. But the gap between ambition and reality is still massive. Meanwhile, other countries are moving fast. The United States, China, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan are all investing heavily in their chip industries. If Europe does not speed up, we risk falling even further behind. If Europe wants to be a serious global player in chip making, it will need more than just good intentions. It will need more investment, better coordination, and a long-term strategy that is grounded in what is realistically achievable. Because in the race for microchips, the rest of the world is not slowing down. The clock is ticking. Europe must act now to turn its ambition into reality. before 2030 becomes just another missed opportunity. Thanks for watching.